LeAnn, your definitive guide for exceptional leadership and successful entrepreneurship, airing every week at 2 p.m. Pacific time exclusively on Win Win Women TV. I am your host, LeAnn, and I am thrilled to be here sharing this journey with you. Each week on Lead with LeAnn, you'll join me as we delve into the inspiring stories of established leaders and innovative entrepreneurs. We'll uncover just what it takes to build a brand from scratch, lead with authority and grace, and turn business aspirations into tangible success. Lead with LeAnn is not only about imparting knowledge, it's about creating a space to laugh and learn and leap forward together in our quest for professional and personal growth. Whether you're embarking on a new entrepreneurial venture or looking to inject some fresh energy into an existing one, there will always be insights for you here. So get ready for thought-provoking conversations, enlightening insight, actionable advice, and the support of a network that champions the win-win philosophy. Learn to lead with passion, purpose, and determination right here on Lead with LeAnn. So today, you get to meet Olivia Atkin, a beacon of inspiration from Arkansas, whose vibrant spirit was nurtured in New Jersey's colorful setting. And Olivia's extraordinary path, is paved with a passion for leadership and personal growth. At the helm of Achieving Success LLC, she's not just a business maven, but a mentor, an author, and a voice of motivation through her podcast, Achieving Success. Her webinars create a community where authenticity and ambition thrive. I'm so glad she's into authenticity because this is authentic. Olivia's journey is a testimony and a testament to her dedication to inspire and guide others towards their own pinnacle of success. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to have our conversation today.
It's so good to see you again. Of course, I always meet people before they show up live on my show, but it's been a couple months. So how was the introduction? Did I miss anything? What's new?
No. You are doing great, like always, right? And when we talk about being authentic and your true self, that sometimes means like I pronounce words sometimes, or I'll be going and we'll probably see it today where I'll stumble or say the wrong word and then backtrack a second. And that's true in everything we do. So I think it was great. And I'm just excited to dive into everything because I love talking about our own journeys and habits and sharing stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been doing this, working in podcasting for a little bit, but how did you get started? Were you a journalism major in college?
No, I actually was going to go into the sports world. I did go into the sports world. I was one of the youngest interns to ever intern at the New York Football Giants, where I then went on to work with them for 6 seasons. So the Super Bowl yesterday is always a highlight of my year because no matter what's going on, all my former athletes that I managed with the Giants or when I was working there or ended up managing them personally, because a lot of them ended up coming to me and asking for help on projects that they were doing, and then into other sectors like the MLB and things like that. They all come to me. So last night was definitely a night where I'm getting texts from all my guys, past and present, who played and talking about the game. So that's a love and show of the community. But that's what I thought I was going to be doing my whole career, and talking about pivoting and changing projections. In 2019, I decided to go back to school and get my MBA. I decided to challenge myself even more and do a 2-year MBA program in 3 semesters, which included a summer program, ended up doing it in 2. And during that time, God was kind of on my side with it because COVID hit spring 2020. So perfect time, because I wouldn't have been working or had a career at that point, and went on to work at Lockheed Martin because my concentration in my master's program was supply chain. and worked there and was asked to go back and teach career development. And through doing all these speaking engagements and teaching about career development, because I have a degree or certification in every business area, I was approached by a publishing company to write a book. And the book is called Achieving Success in Career Development. And that is one division of my 3 divisions within Achieving Success. And I never thought I'd be an author. I never thought I'd do that. And when the opportunity came up, I didn't say no the first moment it happened. I thought about it, negotiated what that would look like, and everything met what I envisioned, how I learned that as a student, how others can use it. And when that got published July 1st, 2022, the project manager and the team kind of came to me because I did a closing Zoom call with them to celebrate. And they were like, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? We really think you would be great. You have all these stories, all these backgrounds, working in different industries, all these different stuff. And up until that point, I never thought about podcasting, never thought I'd be in that space. And fast forward to September, and I decided not to go back and teach career development. But there were these certain small things that kept populating no matter the industry I worked in, and especially came up with my students. And I was like, let me dive into this more. And so September 14th, I started researching podcasting and what that would look like and what it took. And November 1st is when we released the first episode of Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin that drops every single Tuesday. So we're 60, tomorrow will be 68 weeks in, and it's a top 5% most listened to podcast globally. It's in the only podcast currently that's in all 7 continents, and it's in 27 countries. So the journey has been crazy, but even through that, that's how I ended up launching the 3rd division of Achieving Success, which is the consulting and speaking side.
Okay, wow, that is quite the journey. Something that caught my attention while you were talking, though, is you said, in terms of, where you were at and what you were studying, and you said, thank God I got a chance to, that this happened this way because of COVID. Was that an actual leading force, or is that a term that you use?
I think for me, it's a mix of both. I think we all have, there is that higher power, right? And that vision that we might not see in real time that guides us. But at the same point, our own decisions guide us. I was the one who decided to go back to school. I challenged myself. But the way the earth works and, just a life that we cannot control, COVID ended up happening. So it ended up being serendipity, a perfect time for me to go back to school, because I was completing a degree when a lot of people started thinking about starting that degree.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, yep, serendipitous would be the right word for sure. And again, even believers will say we have free will. We can make our choices. But then there's also the following the path that may or may not have been the path that we were destined for. Do you feel a sense of destiny with what you're doing?
I do. I think everything I've done, there's that momentum I've had, but there's certain things that always kind of like shine in a way that you kind of have to think twice about it. I remember, again, going back to the podcast and starting my business, there was right before the beginning of September when I decided to dive into this. All 4 of my grandparents have passed away, and I was very close with all of them. And my grandmother on my mom's side was the last one to pass away. And she watched me go through college, like fully become an adult. And she kept popping into my dreams. And this discussion I would have with her, and the few times it focused around podcasting, like out of nowhere, she would come in and she'd be like, you got to go for it. You got to do it. I see you doing it. And I'm like, that's when I finally like woke up and was like, what do I have to lose? Like, I had a full-time job at the time. I had all these things. Now, again, that was September, and I launched my business, which had the consulting side, the speaking side, and the podcast, and then obviously the book that had already been released November 1st. Fast forward to March, the podcast had already started to explode. In 30 days, we were in 4 countries, continued to grow. The consulting side started to grow. In March of 2023, I was part of the Lockheed Martin mass layoffs. And it was that moment where when people started finding out that I was part of the mass layoffs, they started offering me jobs, right? Like, you're a great employee, great leader, come work for us. We've been trying to get you over here. Just come work here. Or I could lean into something I had already built where for the first time, all those passions, those purpose that I never looked at the clock, no matter how busy I got. I was like, oh my God, I have to do this recording, or I have to do these calls. Might be stressful, but it was stress I was looking forward to. And I was like, I got to dive into this. But if it wasn't, again, to all those things that were set into motion beforehand, and even my trainings, the skills I've honed over the years in past business areas and jobs, I wouldn't be in the spot I was at that point.
Yeah, I what I'm hearing is that, you know, I don't know how to exactly say it. You said it and it kind of glimmered on me. That's how it happens, right? But there was a point where, I think what it stimulated is one of the things we talked about before was that about not necessarily following a traditional path, that it's okay to look. That's what I was looking for, is the exact quote. Oh, I found it. Hold on one moment here. You said that just because it's not a typical way of doing things or running a business doesn't mean you cannot do it your way. Is that kind of what you were just saying right there?
Yeah, and that is one of my mottos.
Yeah.
When people tell you how to do what you're passionate about and you have your vision, it doesn't mean their way will work for you. It's just their insight. And again, I'll go back to my podcast. 1 week before I found out that between week 18 and 19 of my podcast being released, it became a top 10% most listened to podcast globally. In the beginning of that week that I found out, I was on a call with 4 other entrepreneurs, and they were asking me what my niche was. And I was explaining to them, both in the consulting side and the podcast side, I wasn't really niche. There wasn't one client I was looking for. It was okay if you want to talk about achieving success and your goals, both personally and professionally, and those high highs and low lows, then like you could potentially be a guest on my show. And that's my listener base, are people looking for that and that connectivity and those experiences and knowing they're not alone. And with the consulting side, anyone looking for resume help, cover letters, it didn't matter where you were professionally wise, you were trying to grow as a professional, thinking about those next steps and podcasting. And they said to me, you're not niche enough. You're not going to succeed. And I left the call being aggravated because I was like, first of all, who are you to tell me I am not going to succeed and that I'm going to fail? And that I really need to sit here and reevaluate who my client base is. And I was like, you don't see the vision I see. Just because you think you need to become really niche. And I think part of that we're taught in school, in business schools, like you need to have your one niche and that's only who you can serve. It was like, watch, I know what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to do. And if it fails, it fails, but I see it. And at the end of the week, I got an email that the podcast was a top 10% most listened to podcast globally. And I was like, see, people are connecting with it. Just because you can't see it or you don't think it should work one way doesn't mean that has to be how I do my business.
No, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I've been a fan since I made the mistake of I hired an assistant one time, and I'm like, okay, before I hired her, I like documented everything that I did, exactly how I did it, when I did it, how I did it, all the resources, and I was like, here, just do this. And I handed it to her, and it was different, you know. She didn't do things in the same order. She mixed things up, she stirred things around, and I was like, you know, just. And then it was a coach or somebody I was talking to said, LeAnn, look, 80%, if they do 80% of what you need, 20% is just style. Go with it. You're going to be fine. And when I really took a step back and I looked at what was getting done, how it was getting done, it was getting done. You know, just because at 10:05 she was doing, you know, something different, like taking a break or something, you know, things still get done. So having some flexibility, but there must be some things that are kind of core. Like you got to do some stuff that everybody does. Let's say in podcasting, do you want to give an example of a couple core things that
Yeah,
maybe aren't so far?
so for me, and kind of going off your assistant example, is like I release an episode once a week, every Tuesday. It
Yeah.
releases at 7 a.m. EST time.
Mm-hmm.
So when I have my production team to post it, and they don't post at 7 a.m., they're immediately getting texts. Why didn't I get an alert that it was just posted on iTunes? Because, right, I get the alerts
Yeah.
of, okay, the episode has been released. I'm like, why didn't the alert go up? And they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm like, no, these are the things. One of the most important things that you have to do within podcasting specifically, but it also falls into other areas of business, is coming up with your strategy and sticking to your strategy. You
Yeah.
might not have that niche, but like you said, there are those certain tasks that need to be done strategically and released strategically to grow your business, to
Yeah.
grow your community, to grow that network. So some of them for me is like, and I ask this of other hosts, what's your consistency in titles? Do you have a consistency in day of release, time
Mm.
of release, how you prep? All of those things need to be consistent so that you have your flow, your audience has their flow. So you can create it the way you want to create it, but you need to have the system set up so you can have it consistent every single time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sometimes a lot of hosts, prior to talking to them, they don't think about. They go, oh, I have a creative title. Okay, well, is there consistency in your title?
Mhm.
Or are you just throwing words out? Are you looking and just putting a name on a page, but Joe Schmo off the street might not know if
Right.
you just make your title Olivia Atkin,
Yeah.
who the freak Olivia Atkin is.
Yeah.
So, like, is there that hook? How can we navigate that? And those are the things that it doesn't matter what day you release, because depending on your topic, it should release and do better on certain days over others. But, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day what that week's title is, but how does it align with your brand? How does it align with everything you're else are doing? And those are the things you need to be consistent on.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's, you know, if you're not reliable, you're not reliable. And if people don't feel you're reliable because you're not consistent, you know,
Mhm.
they will not then look for you know, your last episode or your next, they won't have that anticipation. Now we know a lot of times people aren't really listening live all that often. Very often it's the replays that drive our numbers up much more than the live listens. But it still comes back to you have to have that live listening. It's, you know, 2 p.m. Pacific time every Monday, you know, with very few exceptions, and those are usually holidays.
Mhm.
You know, this is here, or we do a recording of some sort. But let's go back to you. So
Okay.
you grew up Midwest, but then you were really raised in New Jersey, you said, correct?
Yeah, so I was born in Lone Rock, Arkansas, and lived there until I was 4 years old.
Mm.
So my running joke is, people ask me, especially as a redhead, how do I know you're mad? Because I say I never get mad. I said, you know, when the drawl of the southernness starts to come out in my words, the angrier I get, the harder the words sound, like will come out in a Northeast accent, they're going to come out in a Southern accent because that's where really my dialect was formed.
Yeah.
However, there are certain words I say in a hard Northeast accent. Like I will say talking and chocolate and some of those key words. But I also say I get that Southern drawl anytime I am put back in the South. I did my TEDx talk in Dallas. So by the end of the weekend, I had a Southern drawl and I came prepared. I was like, listen, guys, Friday night we had an event. I was like, I'm just giving you the heads up. I think like I need to like only talk to people for like an hour because if I start hearing it, it's gonna start to come out and I've prepped my talk too much to like start having a Southern draw in it. But by the end of the weekend, I was having that Southern draw. But going from a place where you're so small and that being the South and growing up in the Northeast, it's very different environments. But one
Mm.
of the things my parents did was every few years we went back to the South. We went back to where I was born. We got to see like one of my favorite restaurants to this day is called the Purple Cow. And it's only in Little Rock and it was in Texas until COVID hit and it closed a few of their restaurants that they had in Texas. And like anytime we go out there, I'm like, I need to go here. And that's because my parents also kept those memories alive. So I have roots in both the Northeast and New Jersey and Philly to Connecticut because that's where I went to school. But yeah, my heart's always in the South.
So is that why your background's a little purplish?
Yeah. My favorite colors, I say it really worked out color scheme wise for me because my number one favorite color is purple. And my second, just with like my experiences and different things I've done, is blue.
Oh, fun.
So everything business oriented is shades of purple and blues.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, here's a fun fact. I have eaten
Mhm.
at the Purple Cow in Little Rock.
Love
For
it.
real. One of our well, the world headquarters for ATA Taekwondo is Little Rock, Arkansas. So I was there for Worlds a couple of times. And yeah, I remember that that was one of the recommended restaurants. I believe we went to it. So that's kind of fun. Small world, little connection.
Exactly. It just demonstrates right there how small the world can be because you can
Yeah.
mention one restaurant and be like, I was actually there. I know what you're talking about. Because the
Yeah.
Purple Cow too is such an experience. It's one of those things that you go for the purple milkshake. You go for the environment you're in.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, that's very cool. So when you said you were 4, you were living there, you moved, so you went to kindergarten through high school probably in kind of the same area, or
mhm.
did you move around some?
No, I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So I went to elementary school, middle, high school, all in the same town. Our town is very big though.
Mhm.
So my there's 13 elementary schools in my town, all with 100 kids in every graduating class. We have three middle schools and two high schools, and each graduating class is about 1,000 kids, 1,500 a year. So very big town.
Yeah.
Just it doesn't seem like.
Yeah. So when you were in like upper elementary school, let's say you're 7, 8 years old, you're not quite at the stage of necessarily getting your fingers painted and being, you get kind of girly in fourth and fifth grade, but more that second and third grade where you're a little more independent. You're not quite such a little kid, but you're not a big kid yet. Do you remember what kind of things you would play or imagine?
Oh, yes. And this is actually something I talk about a lot because my whole life, I remember two kind of defining moments and
Okay.
like paths. One was before I was 9 years old and what my life looked like, and one was really once I turned 9. So before I was 9 years old, I was a professional swimmer. I was training for the Junior Olympics when I was 9 years old. I was competing with the age group of 15 and 18-year-old kids and beating them. And to like kind of give you the picture, I'm 5 foot and 90 pounds at 29 years old. So we can only imagine how small I was at 9. And However, when I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and it was a rare form of epilepsy because there were certain anomalies in it. Like, um, I started with grand mal seizures, which is what people typically see on TV, the shaking, the seizing to the ground, um, not knowing where you are, to though if I was swimming, because I'd been swimming from such a young age, the first time I had a seizure in the water, I went under for about 2 seconds because my fight or flight and my brain just knew from all the hours of training, if you go under, you're either swimming or you're doggy paddling. There's nothing else. So my body just instinctively, instead of drowning, started going into doggy paddle. So there was a lot of things that got learned about neurology with my neurologist as I was living it real time. But at 9 years old, I had to give up one of the things I was most passionate about. And the only real extracurricular I knew at the time, and had to redefine what everything was going to look at like. At that time, too, for me, it wasn't just, okay, now you need to find a new sport. I was having so many seizures when I started having seizures. My first neurologist actually, after changing medications like 5 times and nothing working, and the seizures were only increasing and not decreasing in length and how many I was having in a day, actually sat down with me and my parents and were like, listen, she's going to have like, she has a special aid now in school, which I'd never experienced before. But like, that's going to be the norm. And if she can make it to like middle school with being in a regular classroom and being able to have brain, able to do things, like, that's great. So at a very young age, after that, like that moment, it was really where I had to define my future, and no one else could do it for me. No one else could work through it.
Wow. Wow. That is not part of the story I knew. Thank you for being willing to share that. You know, what I did hear though is this, because I'm always looking for, where were you in that 7, 8-year-old stage? And where are you now? And what I heard, and I just have chills thinking about this, in 7 and 8, you were preparing to be world class,
Mm-hmm.
and you still are.
Oh, thank you. That just gave me the chills. I appreciate you saying that, because I think one of the things I try to always do, and now I'm tearing up, so thank you. No host has ever made me do that. You're definitely the first. But going through that experience, right? I was at the top of my game at that age and really preparing for what I could continue to do. And through having epilepsy, I didn't just lose my sport. I lost all my friends because I didn't even understand what was going on with me. How are you going to expect other 9-year-olds
Right.
to, right? My siblings lost some friends. My parents lost friends because no one really understood what was happening. And it's hard to explain if you don't know. And my whole life changed. And for me, ever since then, it's been something where I go, I have to be humble, because I know not everything that you see on the outside is potentially what's going on in the inside. So many people can be struggling, and that's part of the reason I started achieving success, is like, we can all be going through struggles, and it's inevitable. It might not look like having seizures and not understanding or being able to control them, and your neuro functions are changing. It might be going through depression. It might be losing your job. It could be all these things, but life is always changing. And in today's world, they're not things we talk about. We
Right.
don't always talk about those B and C moments. We only want to show on social media how amazing we're doing all these things. But it's so important to talk about those moments and understand that we all go through them. And so for me, I never want to make anyone feel like, okay, look how great I'm doing. Look at all these things I'm accomplishing. Because I know firsthand tomorrow I might not be on top of the mountain and there's going to be a new mountain to climb. And the person I'm talking to today, possibly for no fault of their own, could be going through something that doesn't feel comfortable sharing it and just they're going through the motions.
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you've listened to, I don't talk as much on my shows as I love to listen and share the other stories. But, well, first of all, I was a swimmer as well.
Mhm.
Swam with really great swimmers. But you know how on the swimming pool, all the fast swimmers are on the one lane, yeah, I was over here. Just saying, way over here. And then I developed a situation in my hands where I got so cold that my hands would actually just freeze. Like
Mhm.
it couldn't, and it was incredibly painful. The only thing they could diagnose it with was something that seemed very scary at the time. They thought it was related to kidney function. Eventually, I kind of outgrew it, which is nice. But it was very painful. I had to, if you can imagine, I had to swim wearing wool mittens. Do you know how heavy wool mittens get in the water?
I was gonna say they're pretty heavy, and it's one of those things too, like a training suit you wear. It's only gonna slow you down. It's not
Good.
gonna help you in any facet.
No. And I mean, when, I'd take them off for a race and it was just like, freedom. But I really had to wear them or I just couldn't. I mean, I couldn't stay in the water long enough for the practices. I eventually became a synchronized swimmer. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I
And
didn't.
did go to the Junior Olympics, 4 times the regionals, came in second place 4 times. So never went on to nationals, but it was a really wonderful experience. I very much enjoyed it. At the same time, I was hit by a drunk driver when I was 17, and talk about a way to lose friends fast. When your family is going through something, and especially if it's you, you're right. People just don't get it. They get really freaked out. They just don't know how to relate to you. Yeah, it's a mind shift. And I have a lot of grace, as I think you do as well, on those people who were at the time, it seemed like they were, I really have a lot of grace. They didn't do anything. They just didn't know what to do. We were so young. And even today, I sometimes have people come back and say, I feel bad about how I treated you then. And I'm like, hey, we were kids, you
Mhm.
know? So it's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing also the grace that you have and the perspective you have on meeting people because you just never know, especially in this world where everything is supposed to be happy, happy, joy, joy.
Mhm. And that's
So,
the thing. If you can't extend grace to others, how do you expect to receive grace in return?
yeah,
I
right.
think that's one of the most important things when we're thinking about like that person did me wrong, they no notion. Sometimes there's things going on that we don't know about. Again, it's all situational. I'm not saying you need to give everyone 100 yards, right? Of like, do me wrong freedom.
No.
But it can be situational. Is there something that when you take emotions out of it, you can kind of look at it with a different perspective and go, okay, I could kind of understand or I can kind of think about this differently and this is where I can be empathetic and this is where I need to hold my ground. But I always go back when people are strong in their stance and always so quick to not give individuals grace. My question is, what why do you think people should be giving you grace then if you
Mhm.
can't give it to others? And then too, those a lot of times are individuals who don't give grace to themselves and they're
100%.
always asking for it. But they forget that grace works both ways.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Wow. Well, this was delightful. I love doing this. This for me, this is I don't know. I'm still not sure if I do the podcast for me or to really do what I say it's about, which is to highlight phenomenal business leaders and especially business women in the show on the WinWinWomen.tv network. But it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. I know that you have, some other things that you talk about often and a gift actually that you put together for our audience, which is an exposure package. Do you want to tell me about that?
So that's for individuals, whether they're podcast hosts or they are individuals who have their own business, wanting to grow, want to build their network, use it for marketing. I help individuals get on podcasts or sometimes get guests for their podcast. A host could use the package either way or a mix of both. A business owner who wants to get on podcasts to help with SEOing, marketing, helping just build more of a community. I think there's such a community and an amazing community, let me highlight that, within the podcasting space between hosts and guests and just the relationships you build. So I work with individuals to get them on the right podcast, to build those right relationships, to get the right reach to their customer base, whatever their goal is. And that's what the exposure package is all about, is being able to use your voice and be heard and connect with other people's in the way that you want to do it, because it's ultimately about what is your purpose, what is your vision.
And this was a $50 off of that exposure package. To be clear, it's not free, but but a very nice and generous gift. So how do people reach you? Where should they find you? What's the best way and how can they follow you on your podcast?
So podcast wise, we are on every platform for audio: iTunes, Spotify, Google, Amazon. We record everything with video, so you can check it out on YouTube by just searching Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. You can follow me on LinkedIn by searching Olivia Atkin, or the business. The business has its own page, Achieving Success LLC. You can follow the business Instagram at Achieve Success, or the same handle on Facebook. And then you can reach out to me through my website, achieving-success.com, or by my email, olivia.atkin@achieving-success.com. I do answer every message that comes in personally, so it might take me a day or two to get to you, but I will get to every message.
Oh, well, I love that. And we are going to end here just in a few moments, but anybody on the live stream, if you want to come over and join our live audience here at winwinwomen.tv, you can come on over. You will jump into the Zoom room. Don't worry, you won't be visible right away. But then you're welcome to come in and ask Olivia or me any questions you might have about what we're doing, where we are, something you heard, or share something that maybe you heard today that touched your heart, as both of us had moments like that today too. So we would love to have you over here. Once again, come on over to winwinwomen.tv. I'll be right at the top of the page. If you're live, watching the live recording here, then and you can just push the green button and you'll end up right here. But again, Olivia, thank you so much for being here. I really loved this. And I know you're on all 7 continents. I wanted to ask that one question too. All 7 with your podcast. Does that mean somebody in Antarctica has listened to you?
Yes, it's such a funny story because I didn't even realize prior to like mid-December that I had actually reached all 6. At that time, I think we were in 23 countries. And it wasn't until I was on the phone one night with my dad, because I family group text every time we have exciting moments or parts of our day or landmarks in each of our careers. And so I always text when it's a new country. And my dad called me that night and he's like, I feel like you were just like in 13. Did I miss something? And I'm like, oh no, like I'm pretty sure maybe I stopped putting it in the group chat. Like I forget. And so he's like, well, tell them to me. And so I start naming them. And my dad's driving home, like we're just catching up at the end of the day. And he stops me like halfway through the list. And he goes, you do realize you're in 6 continents. Like you can't really get better than that. And I was like, wait, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm mapping this out in my head. And at that point, I like kept talking the first few moments because I never stopped talking. And he's like, "No, I'm listening to all your countries," and I'd listen them all out for him. He's like, "You're in six. I mean, it really, you're like everywhere because no one's gonna listen to you in Antarctica." And I was like, well, I feel like that was a challenge, and now I got to figure out a way. So thank you. And so my dad's like, why am I not surprised that now you took that and go, how can I figure out a way to get into Antarctica? So that was actually one of my biggest goals for 2024 was not even to get there. Can we even figure out if it's possible? Because I started researching to even see, and there is no one who lives there all year round. Even the scientists, technically no one can live there. Scientists are allowed to live there, but not all year round. It's only for either a 3 month or 6 months at a time, max. If it's 6 months out of the year, it can't be consistent because it gets so cold and everything. I was like, I don't even know if they have antennas there. Like, what is going on? Will it even reach? And I was like, I got to figure this out. And it'd be an amazing goal if I could close out the year of 2024 with having all 7. And a few days into 2024, I get a message on LinkedIn by someone who listened to the podcast, and they were listening to it in Antarctica. And I knew this not only because they took a photo of them in Antarctica with the podcast being listened to, but they'd been on social media posting about their trip and all this stuff. And they were there visiting for a month and a half. And they were meeting some of the scientists, and they were on a work trip. And so the scientists also started to listen. And so I ended up meeting that goal that I'd set for myself January 2nd, 2024, 2 days into the new year.
Look at that. Wow.
Yep. And I was like, and it's currently the only podcast that's in all 7 continents. People have gotten there prior, but it's the only currently active podcast that's listened in all 7.
Well, I may have to try to join that list.
Very exclusive one. So I bring on all the individuals who want to get on all 7, or at least get into probably the hardest continent to get into. I would love to build that community up.
Oh, that's so fun. Well, thank you. I'm so glad I asked that one final question, because that was a super cool story. So thank you. And thank you, Olivia, again for taking your time and being here and sharing just your joyful continents and continents. Something about that.
I knew what you meant. You meant content. And I think you said continents, which is great. I was following you, girl. I got you.
Yeah. No, I think your joyful spirit, as well as being on 7 continents. Okay. Well, we're going to stop right here, but come on over and join us in our live room. We do not record those questions, so we'd love to see you over there. And thank you again for joining me. We'll talk with you again.